Hello everybody, more Japanese goodness today, and I am driving something that is rather unusual even in the rarefied world of JDM vehicles, and this one is actually genuine JDM. This is a 2003 Toyota Crown Athlete V, recently imported by my friend Alex. Now, Alex is a bit of a sucker for the Japanese. He actually owned the Subaru Impreza WRX that I then bought off of him. And then he had a couple of other cars in the middle, and he's now got this as his daily. It's a very nice choice for a daily driver, I have to say. And one of those JDM vehicles which, on the face of it, seems like actually a kind of sensible thing to buy. Now, the Crown is a model with a storied history. It was introduced in 1955, and this is something like the 11th of 15 generations of car. It's a complicated story, and the car has technically been replaced by different cars in different markets in different years, and for different market segments. There's going to be people out there that know lots and lots and lots about the Crown. I'm not one of them. I'm just here to enjoy the car and report back what it's like to drive. This car, as mentioned, was very recently imported. With the exception of some unknown brand lowering springs that came with it, it is totally standard and as it came from Japan, right down to the roadside flare, the electronic toll tag in the glove box, and these stickers on the car. In fact, only one sticker didn't come with the vehicle. Yes, even the Hawaii surf stickers on the back came with it, so presumably the previous owner had been on holiday and put some stickers on his car, which funnily enough is exactly what Alex does with his own vehicles. Alex chose the Crown because he's a fan of Japanese cars, he loves a good estate, as do I, and he's also a fan of the underdog, and over here these are just, well, not around. Even the Stagea is a relatively common car compared to these. He decided to sit and wait for a reasonably priced example to come up, and as it turned out, he didn't have to wait that long, because about a month later, this appeared. He then bought it, it was imported, he had the car under sealed, prepped, and it's been given a lovely clean by some chaps at a company called 3D Plus Detail, who are fairly local to us both, and it actually looks pretty good. Now, to the untrained eye, I think you would very easily mistake this for your common or garden variety Mercedes E-Class estate. The silver paintwork definitely doesn't help in that regard, but if you spend a little bit longer looking at it, it still looks like a Mercedes E-Class estate. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though. On the interior front, it's that classic 90s, 2000s Japanese luxury. It's still got lots of cloth in here. The seats are very comfortable. Crucially for Alex, who is 6'7", it has plenty of headroom, although he is currently sort of bundled up in the passenger seat next to me. And there is shed loads of room in the boot. I mean, an obscene amount. There's even more storage below it as well. So for a practical runabout that you can buy for less than $5,000, it's got a lot going for it. Of course, being a Toyota, it is fairly well engineered, and in Japan, I believe these are relatively popular and common cars. I mean, they must be, otherwise they wouldn't have bothered making 15 generations of the thing. What I think is of most appeal to a lot of people, though, is the engine. It's got a 1JZ in it, and this particular car is not just any old 1JZ, it's the 1JZ GTE, the turbo one. As is tradition with Japanese cars of the period, it produces 280 horsepower and about 280 pound-foot of torque. This car, being a later VVTi example, has a very different turbo setup to earlier cars. Those were twin turbos, and this is a single. It makes actually more torque, but significantly a lot more torque, a lot lower in the RPM range than the original twin setup, which is contrary to what I would expect, but that is the way that it is. And that does mean that the car is ridiculously responsive. Yes, Alex does have some plans to modify it, but he's going to enjoy it in its relatively standard state for now. He can see this car staying around for a while, and the good news is that, as you might imagine, with cars with this engine, you have an awful lot of options available to you. Not just for engine-related stuff, of course, but also cosmetic, handling, and all that jazz.
If this were my car, the first item on the agenda would be the suspension. The lowering springs of unknown provenance fitted to this car give it a mean-looking stance, but they make it impractically low for daily driver duty, and they also give the car a fidgety and bouncy quality which really doesn't befit such a luxurious vehicle.
Visibility out is great, and because the thing is basically all squares and straight lines, very easy to place on the road. The little lights on the corner, which apparently are green at night, I guess are there to help you park it, and that one in particular over there is actually very usefully placed. If you're trying to manoeuvre this car in a small little city, I can see that as being very handy indeed. Fuel economy, I expect, is probably not brilliant, as it isn't with anything with a JZ in it. However, that's not what you buy these for. What I'm going to do now is turn this into power mode and manual. There are buttons on the steering wheel. There are only 4 ratios to choose from, and actually I think that's a pretty good thing. I used to be the sort of person that would look down on gearboxes like this, and in truth I still do sometimes, but for a car of this type, sometimes I feel like this sort of box does it a lot better than the more modern 6, 7, 8, 9 speed boxes, because I've driven a lot of cars with those and you put your foot down and they spend a long time choosing what gear to be in, whereas this, for the most part, you just put your foot down and it just goes. And let's see how much it does go. Oh, it's reasonably brisk. And it actually seems quite keen on revving out too. Long-term viewers of the channel may remember the fact that I have actually driven a Supra, a 4th generation genuine twin-turbo car, but with the auto box that came in that. And although that car was lightly modified, the 2J just doesn't really seem to have that much interest in actually being revved out, whereas the 1J just seems like the sort of sportier, keener engine to me. This really does have some sort of effortless performance, and for driving down a road like this, it's very, very well equipped. Now, what is interesting is the steering, because it actually has some texture and feedback coming through it. It is quite light, but more than that, it's also one of the slowest racks that I've driven in a very long time. You have to turn the wheel way more than you expect to, particularly when you are manoeuvring. However, it does have pretty decent lock and therefore a pretty tight turning circle for something that is a very large car. That means that it's actually quite useful. It's not the loudest car, that's why I have no exhaust camera running today, that and the fact there isn't anywhere to really put one, and I'm sure that when Alex is done with this it's going to sound somewhat more vocal. These engines do sound utterly marvellous. It is one of the few genuinely iconic sounds out there. It's completely its own thing. It sounds entirely unlike a BMW straight six, unlike a Nissan RB lump. There's nothing quite like a JZ. That they are magical things, and one day I need one in my garage. Would I have one of these? I don't know, probably not, because I've got loads of other big cars, but maybe a Sora, something like that. I don't know. I mean, the Supra I've always felt was just a little bit overrated. That and the fact I'm not going to spend £100,000 on a 25-year-old Japanese car. Just not going to happen. But for bimbling around town, this is quite nifty. So now we are in town, let's talk a little bit more about the interior. It's got that cloth fabric, it's got this really interesting kind of, like, I'm not sure if it's a fancy speaker or a kitchen worktop. A switchgear, which is very familiar to anyone that's owned a Toyota of this period. It's still got all of the original Japanese infotainment stuff in it, which is all pretty cool. It of course doesn't work because it has absolutely no idea where it is. The AC works, the heater works, and actually it's quite a refined car, which you would certainly hope from this type of vehicle. insurance on this isn't as cheap as I expected it to be. It's currently insured through Adrian Flux, one of the specialist brokers here in the UK. And reasons for that include the fact that its owner is still reasonably young. It's his first rear-wheel drive car, and for whatever reason, this is considered to be a performance car. I think for a lot of other people, it might be reasonably cheap to insure if you can get specialist insurance or sort of group car policies, because it is still an import, and some of them, certainly earlier ones, might now qualify as classics as well. It's odd driving cars like this, because I know that in its homeland, this wouldn't really be a particularly unusual vehicle. However, here it is. It's just smooth, really smooth. It's only those lowering springs really that kind of ruin proceedings a little bit, but otherwise this is a magnificent thing to tool about in. Quite the opposite to the S660 that I was driving the other day, and I think that's one of the things that's so appealing about JDM vehicles. You've got everything from dinky K cars up to the big old VIP Alphards and that kind of stuff, and that's, I think, just so amazing. There's this entire ecosystem of vehicles that we simply don't see. I appreciate that a lot of these vehicles might be fairly common size to people that live closer to there, particularly guys in New Zealand, Australia, that kind of stuff, but for us, I don't know why people don't import more of these, because there's a real serious passion for Japanese cars over in the UK, and this is something that can be run as a very practical, very usable daily. There's a lot of vehicles I know that people import that require some serious dedication to keep running, and even stuff like the S660, which is very fun, but then totally impractical. You need to have a real passion to run those things, but one of these, you don't. I mean, crikey almighty, what's that? It's a Chrysler. It's a Chrysler Le Bastard. It's a huge, great big hulking minivan, a totally soulless vehicle that was being driven by a woman who I can confirm very much looked dead inside, and you wonder why you would wish a car like that on yourself. You could have one of these. I'm pretty sure she could fit all of the children that weren't in that car in this. You fit loads of shopping in the back. It's nice, it's smooth, it's luxurious. It very much is the Japanese Mercedes. Yes, you will have some issues with them, particularly rust, things like that. That's why Alex took care to make sure to get this one under sealed. So any vehicle that's already been in the UK for a while, keep an eye on that. There will probably be owner's guides out there for them, but otherwise they seem pretty cool. It's a car that, until Alex mentioned it to me, I had never heard of. I'd heard of some of the other high-end Toyotas, the Century, things like that. And if you are out there with a vehicle of any description, not just Japanese, you'd like to see on the channel, please do get in touch and let me know. The way of doing that is in the description below. But just before I sign off, I think I would be doing myself and everybody watching a disservice if I didn't mow down all these people test this car on my favourite little back road. The joy of having so few gears to choose from is the fact that you don't really have to put a lot of thought into it, and it's got quite a bit of reach, as it were, in each gear. Now, one odd thing, when you come off the throttle, it does seem to sort of be somewhat abrupt. What's going on there? It's almost like it's got a sprint boost, and you're like, whoa, like it's really quite aggressive, but yeah, it shifts nice enough. The springs don't ruin it completely, but they do feel a bit at odds with the rest of the car. You can still place it, like I mentioned earlier. You've just got to turn about 25% more than you think you have to. And it's not slow. It's not fast, not really fast, but it's not slow either. And it's the way that it gets up to speed that is important. It's so drama-free. You've just got that little soundtrack in the background. Actually, the car it sounds most like is my 7 Series, which, considering that has a big old V12 in it, is quite a compliment. It's a very, very similar tone. I really like this car. I don't know why other people don't buy these. Get one instead of the Stagea. I mean, it's not that I have anything against the Stagea. The Stagea is a lovely car, but this is a Toyota, and so it probably is better. And it's rarer, which is always cooler. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.